council met in executive session. There were no votes taken. We are just taking a recession from, a recess from executive session so that we can start discussing regarding short-term rentals, so we will leave that open. At this time, we are opening up to talking about the short-term rentals. Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, probably best if I got a slideshow.
Okay.
Okay, so good afternoon, Mayor, council members, the public. Workshop on short-term rentals. Didn't know exactly what the catalyst was for this. This was set up prior to me the equipment position that I'm in, but clearly there is a want by city council to address short-term rentals and readdress the issue. So our tourism, we're a tourism-based economy. So obviously, short-term rentals are a big part of that. We've got people who choose to rent their house, use it as a business, but we also have people who live here full-time and don't choose to rent their house. But they have they have to deal with that activity because a lot of those might live right next door to where they're at. So they have to deal with the unintended consequences of a short-term rental. So where to start, I felt like talk about the current state of affairs, where we're at currently in terms of short-term rentals, what we have on the books, what regulations we have in place, and take it from there in terms of staff, what I believe staff would like to see. So we have as a municipality, we have 5,400 short-term rentals that are identified within our system that do have business licenses currently. Out of those 5,400, we have about 1,700 that have a local responsible party that's designated as part of their short-term rental. And they have someone to contact in the event that something goes wrong, someone needs to address the problem. We currently don't have any occupancy limits. We have no geographical constraints. So there's really nothing on the books that would prohibit anyone from renting their house as a short-term rental, other than if you live in a neighborhood as an HOA or other deed restrictions that would prohibit you from doing that. As far as the city is concerned, there are no regulations saying you cannot rent your house. And about 4 years ago, an effort to adopt a comprehensive ordinance. There's a long discussion, brought in business owners, people from the rental community to kind of craft an ordinance that would make sense. And what ultimately ended up happening was it was a stripped-down version was passed that really addressed just noise, trash, and parking problems. So for me, I believe the best part is from staff, the best place to kind of revisit that conversation is with that ordinance. I've reviewed it.
Ron, they can't hear you.
Is this, so I feel like the best place to revisit that conversation is that ordinance that was put together, the draft ordinance 4 years ago. Because a lot of the stuff that was in that ordinance is on. Because it sounds like I'm not getting any. Okay, you can hear me there. Much better. All right, thank you. All right. So that ordinance that was worked on 4 years ago, that, like I said, got stripped down and was really only addressed parking, trash, noise, that's all that got passed, and the short-term rental ordinance was never made official, never got passed. So what I believe we should do is revisit that conversation, like I said, with that original ordinance that got put together. Because there's a lot of stuff in there that us as staff it makes a lot of sense. It gives us a lot of ability to enforce and deal with a lot of the problems that arise from the short-term rentals. So the goal of this conversation and approaching it from staff is to adopt a comprehensive ordinance that requires an annual permit, not just a business license. So this would be in addition to the business license. This is something that's found in many of the coastal communities up and down the coast of South Carolina. And like I said, this is in addition to the business license. And that would also require a local responsible party that can respond to complaints. Like I said, we already have most of the people who have a business license for short-term rentals. They already have someone who's designated as a local responsible party. We'd like to make it mandatory so that everyone does. Now, whether that's they respond within 30 minutes, 45 minutes, that's yet to be determined, but I believe in our original ordinance that the draft version had 30 minutes was the time frame in which they would have to be able to respond. And then on top of that, the biggest issue that I feel with this is enforcement. We have a lot of complaints that come in, but they'll end up coming into administration, or they'll come into revenue, but then they come in over the weekend and we don't get them until Monday. By the time we get them, there's not much we could do about it. So it would behoove us to have a code enforcement group that was dedicated just to short-term rentals, that their sole purpose was to engage with and respond to short-term rentals where there might be problems that arise. So whether that's parking, trash, whether that's noise violations, or whatever unsavory activity takes place as a result of a short-term rental. We have the people in place to address it. And then obviously maybe require some sort of inspection for safety or parking issues. So part of our plan for addressing this.
Can I stop?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, let's go back one slide. It says require a local responsible party that can respond to complaints. How do we identify a responsible party?
So that could be, if you rent your home through a rental company, a property management company, that would probably already serve that purpose. But you might also be just someone who lives here and happens to own 2 or 3 short-term rentals. There's no reason that you yourself, if you live within a reasonable amount of distance where you can respond to a complaint within 30 minutes, there's no reason you shouldn't yourself be able to be that designated representative for your own property. So that is a subjective question. I mean, it's up to council, if we were going to go that route, to determine what a designated local, yeah, so.
Ryan, I don't want to jump ahead, but,
Sure.
and I'm completely okay. I do think that if you live in our city and you have a rental property short-term, that you should be able to represent your own property. But how about, are we going to put a response time for that local representative?
So the original ordinance that was put together 4 years ago had, I believe, was it 30 minutes?
30
So
minutes.
30 minutes was the time frame. So you should be able to respond within 30 minutes. So that would kind of eliminate anyone that doesn't live within, Horry County or the immediate adjacent areas.
And also a time frame to be available, within an hour or 24 hours a day, or, there's got to be a time frame in there.
I mean, it's just got to, obviously, they'd have to be available pretty much any time that a problem would occur, and then have to respond within that 30 minutes.
Right.
So, you're not going to, if it's a company and that's what they do, you're paying for that service, I would assume that you would expect them to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then be able to respond within 30 minutes. If you've got yourself, you're going to know whether or not you are going to be available and able to respond within 30 minutes.
I think that I think that should be the requirement. If we're going to allow local responsible parties, it can be just anybody that you want to pick. And then I would say that would be a requirement to be a responsible party. Also, required physical inspections. Who is going to do that inspections?
So that is part of our recommendation. We want to, like I said, we want to create a code enforcement division that is solely focused on short-term rentals.
Okay.
I mean, I believe it makes up such a large part of what we do here in our local economy. I mean, there are short-term rentals everywhere. So for us to allow for short-term rentals to take place all throughout the city, and then put regulations in place, but then not provide a mechanism for us to then address issues as they arise, I think we're doing the residents a disservice. I mean, if we're going to have regulations in place, if we're not going to enforce them, then what's the point of having them?
Right.
So this would be a vehicle by which we can then respond to when you've got noise complaints or there's just things going on next door at a short-term rental.
Is this complaint driven?
Well, it would be complaint driven, but it would be more than it was before. I mean, if we're going to have an entire staff that's dedicated to enforcing the regulations, we are going to be proactively enforcing it.
Why don't we, I don't mean to interrupt you, why don't we do this? Because all these we're going to have lots and lots of questions. Is let Ryan go through his presentation, because I've only got 5 or 6 questions, just like what are the qualifications for that person, and et cetera, and that way, because from now
Yeah,
we'll be
so let me just get through it, and then we can just
going back and
Talk it
start
out.
digesting.
That'll be fine.
So then how do we go about making it happen? So like I said before, having a permit in place makes a lot of sense. That's, like I said, an additional fee and it's additional permit above and beyond the business license that's required. But that gives us an opportunity to, number one, it's going to be a fee, so it's going to generate revenue, which will give us the ability to pay for all these things that I'm proposing. But number two, it gives an opportunity for the property owner to designate whoever that representative is going to be. And then three, that permit is what gives them the right to use their personal residence or the residence or their property as a business and rent it as a short-term rental. So without that permit, you aren't able to do it. So if we have a code enforcement division who has to repetitively show up to certain homes or certain structures because it's an ongoing problem and they're not going, repetitive issue, we can fine them, and if they still don't comply, ultimately at the end, I don't know, that would have to be determined, but we could revoke their permit. And if their permit is revoked, well, then they will no longer be able to use that property as a short-term rental. So there's incentive there and gives us leverage to get folks to comply. Now, I don't believe it would be something that would happen all that often, but it's, the idea that we would have a property that continually broke the rules, like I said, it gives us the ability to revoke that, and hopefully if you're using it as a business and if it's not being rented, you're not making money. So that should be incentive enough to get them to comply. So part of that would be hiring a management vendor to assist. So GovOS, which is used by other municipalities within the state of South Carolina, Hilton Head being one of them. It's basically it's a solution to help us manage short-term rental activity and help us register those short-term rentals with the permitting process. So they're very helpful in making that happen. And then, if you can see on the slide, it's got assistance in drafting and reviewing the local ordinance that I'm proposing that we work on. We already have something in place, but they would assist us in fine-tuning it. They provide assistance in initiating the inspections that I referenced before, if that were something that we wanted to include in the ordinance. The part that I like the best is that they scrape the internet to look for rental activity that we haven't picked up on. So we know that there are folks out there that rent their house, and they're doing it without having a business license. They're doing it without paying local accommodations and state accommodations taxes. So in essence, the people who are doing it the right way are working at a competitive disadvantage to those who are skirting the rules. So this would give us tools to seek those folks out and make sure we bring them into compliance. They would help us with outreach and communications with people who choose to use their home as a short-term rental, make sure everyone's aware of the rules and the regulations. They'd give us 24-hour staffing for complaint management, meaning when we do have complaints, they would be the first defense in the sense that they would field the phone calls. If it's something that could be handled over the phone and they can correct the issue, great, doesn't have to go any further than that. But if it's something that requires boots on the ground, our own personnel, that's where our code enforcement comes into play, and they can go out and address it. So if it's parking, if it's noise, if it's trash, whatever it might be, our parking law, it wasn't that much of an issue last year, but the idea that our law enforcement officers would be wasting their time in the summer months replying to a guy who's parking and his bumper's hanging over into the sidewalk a little bit too far, our officers have much better things to do with their time than deal with that. So if we could have a code enforcement officer out there dealing with it as opposed to law enforcement, that's great. Now, if it escalates to higher and they don't want to comply, well, then obviously law enforcement is always an option to assist. But really just having our designated code enforcement for just short-term rentals, I think would go a long way in curtailing a lot of the negative behavior. And it's all online, so it's 100% online, so it makes it not just convenient for the city, but it makes it convenient for the property owners when they have to go register for these permits, and then yearly when they have to go and re-register. Sorry, I keep going the wrong way. All right, so like I said, this would be a hybrid model in the sense that GovOS would be our online presence, make it more streamlined, make it a little bit more convenient for everyone, but it would require us to have staff working for the city that was designated to deal with this issue. So this is based on our conversations, this is what we're looking at, and this could change, but just high-level thought process, we're looking at one rental manager, personnel, support personnel for that manager, and then enforcement personnel. It's not like a lot of our activities. It's not a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 type thing. I mean, this is something that's going to be at night. It's going to be on the weekends. So we're going to have staff available at hours that normal, city employees wouldn't be working. So that would be the reason for, such a large staff. So GovOS, we've got a proposal from them. It would be about $300,000 a year, so that is pricey, but I think it's would more than pay for itself in terms of the tools that it provides us, and then obviously, like I said, we're scraping the internet, finding those who are not complying. Can't put a dollar amount on it because we don't know how many there are going to be out there. But you're going to have folks that aren't paying the A-tax who are not, they don't have a business license. So that's all revenue that would be found. They'd have to be brought into compliance if they wanted to continue to rent their house. And then, again, about $700,000 is what we figured it would be for the salary to compensate the code enforcement folks that we would be looking to bring on. So provided that it would be annual fee of $250 per short-term rental permit, and we have 5,400 permits, or 5,400 residents that are currently used as short-term rentals, it would be about $1.3, $1.4 million in revenue, and that would more than pay for the software the code enforcement positions that I'm proposing that council consider. Implementation timeline, if this is something that council gave us the green light to go ahead and work on, prepare the ordinance, have it ready by March 1st, first, second reading, hopefully have it approved by the end of April, and then contract with the vendor finalized in May, and then use the summer months to hire these positions, get them trained, and then hopefully go live for the 2026 year with the permit. And if we get this all finalized by the end of this summer, that gives us, we can start offering those permits by August of 2025 and have it require that folks who are going to rent their house in 2026 have that permit secured before January 1st. And then on an annual basis, that January 1st date would be the date by which everyone who is renting their property would have to secure that permit. So that is, again, this is just from the staff point of view, and there's nothing in the proposed ordinance from 4 years ago or any changes that we would want to make today that would impede or stop any property owner from renting their property. This is just giving us the tools and resources to better enforce the regulations and make sure that people are complying with the short-term rental regulations that we have on the books.
Okay. Well, counsel, let's
The,
open it up for questions.
What we have on our desk is,
So that, I gave you a copy of the draft of the ordinance that was prepared 4 years ago, just
Okay.
because obviously I was going to reference it and wanted you to have it, handy so you could look at it. I don't expect you to go through it all right now,
all right, that's
but this
what I
way, look at it, but like I said, there's nothing in there that it all makes sense to me, and it's all things that would be helpful.
Just be in addition to this.
Well, it would help the city staff,
Yeah.
would help us be able to have a better control or, handle over short-term rental problems that come up.
It would be, today, if we adopted this, of course, we won't adopt it today, but it would just be an extension of the short-term rental.
Well, a lot of everything that I spoke about is already in that ordinance. We'd have to make a few tweaks in terms of how much a permit would be. But for the most part, everything is already in there. It's just a little bit more thought out at this point. We've kind of
Sure.
thought about how there's nothing in that ordinance, obviously, about code enforcement positions. That's a new idea.
Right.
But I think they're needed, to be honest, with the amount of short-term rental activity we have within the
Well,
city.
I do like the idea of a short-term rental enforcement team, code enforcement team. So many times, our officers have calls to short-term rentals. And it is, it takes them away of what they really should be doing. And that is keeping our whole city safe. So I like having the code enforcement of just this, because the majority of our rentals are short-term rentals.
I know we did 4 years ago where we changed to limit the number of parking spaces, based on what was available. Is that working?
So I will
We
say-
had a big issue with that at one time.
Yeah, I mean, it's working in the sense that it's, Sarah, you could probably speak to this better than I can, but it's working in the sense that it sets expectations, so folks who are renting, the expectations are set as to how many cars you can bring. And most people are hopefully going to adhere to that, and they're not going to show up with more cars than are allowed at any residence. So it has been effective. Doesn't mean we don't get calls where, neighbors are complaining about, oh, that Airbnb said it only had 2, and I'm counting 3. The problem with it is,
Enforcement.
well, enforcement, we don't want law enforcement. I mean, I feel like that's just a waste of their time. If we could have code enforcement folks designated to deal with that, that would make sense. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it is effective, but it would be nice to have, right now, the property owners self-report what they believe the total amount of parking spots available are. So if they say 2, and one weekend they start using 3, and they're parking in the front yard, and they get approached about it, they'll comply, and they'll make sure that car is not on their property, they'll park in the right of way. But then there's nothing stopping them from calling on Monday and saying, you know what, I want to change my designation to 3. I mean, that is the extent of the repercussions that they deal with. They could, so as long as they have space on their property, we can't tell them they can't use their front yard for parking if they own the property and they can fit a 3rd car. So that's really how that goes. But that's only happened about 4 or 5 times. But like I said, the intent, it's the optics of it, it's the people see it. Most people want to abide by the rules and regulations, so if they see a property that they're renting only allows for 2 or 3 cars, they're not going to bring any more than what is allowed. That's not to say that everyone is.
One of the biggest issues, well, there's 2 big issues. One is the fact that there's 20 people in 2-bedroom house. I mean, somebody needs to be watching that, because that many people in a 2-bedroom house that's in a neighborhood, that's not fair to the neighbors whatsoever.
Yeah, there's quite a few cities, Isle of Palms and Charleston have a limited number of people based on the number of bedrooms, that sort of thing. They do.
So if we had, like I said, if we had code enforcement dedicated short-term rentals, that would give us the manpower in order to address other things. But you're talking about, restrictions and regulations on occupancy, something we don't have right now. So that would be a completely different conversation, and one that would probably get more attention. But there are numerous ways that you can monitor that and restrict it, and different municipalities do it different ways.
Well, most of the complaints that I've received are short-term rentals showing up in traditional neighborhoods that they haven't been. And so the struggle for us is we have to determine what we can and cannot do legally and dealing with property rights. And to me, this is a help to at least get some restrictions on those issues.
Yeah, I mean, this is just really a way to deal with what we're already allowing. And making sure that those people who are able to rent their house, that they're doing it in a way that is respectful of the neighborhood and their neighbors. And if they're not, that we have the ability to go and kind of correct that behavior. And if they don't want to comply, then we have even further measures that we can take to, ultimately strip them of their ability to rent their house if they want to continue to be a nuisance. Hopefully that would not be the case. But right now, there's nothing that, we don't really have the tools or resources to do that, so.
Well, that's basically how this all started 4 years ago, was because complaints, and I've gotten an email last night again from the one complaint that started it in Windy Hill for me, was it's an older neighborhood, and the house was bought and turned into an Airbnb or VRBO, and now they've got the changeover, weekly. During bike weeks, it's terrible. They have parking. They've actually called the police department, they said, because they were parking the trailers for the bikes on the street too, blocking the streets. So it's a disruption for our people that are already established in these neighborhoods. So we have to get some kind of order and ordinance to kind of keep some of this stuff under control and to make our residents be able to live in peace.
And that is the goal of this ordinance and everything that I've proposed to you. It's really just about keeping things in check and making sure that, addressing more of those like life quality issues so that people aren't disrupting neighborhoods, aren't doing things that are...
Where our professionally managed short-term rentals are very well managed. So I think this is more of to me, would help with the Airbnb and that type thing.
Well, that would clearly be that would be the
Target.
side of the industry that would have an issue with that, because they're going to be challenged to come up with somebody that would be the designated representative. But if you're a local property management company and this is your business, this is what you do, all we're asking by this is just codifying what those folks are already doing. They should have no problem with this, other than the only negative to any of that is that we're asking to put a permit in place, which would cost $250 or whatever it is determined that price would be. It's that extra cost, but that's the cost of doing business, and it's the cost to generate revenue so that we can put folks and people in place so that we can make sure it's properly regulated.
Well, and my second main concern was what Ms. Fontana brought up, was that people parking on the streets. And that has become a very big problem, especially in my neighborhood. And I will tell you, my quality of life has changed, and so has my neighbors, because of short-term rentals in our neighborhood. We were an R1 district, and all of a sudden, here comes short-term rentals, and it has changed completely to the point that my next-door neighbors, they've already bought another house and are moving into the Di-States. And I know that they will sell that house, and probably it will end up with another short-term rental. So it means I've got to make the decision, am I going to live at my house, or am I going to put up with cornhole being played at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you can hear every bag drop? So that's the frustrating part for a lot of us people here in this, that are here and in this community. And I don't know exactly how we're going to take care of that. But this will be a start.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think the
like-
code enforcement is the only way to do it, and I like that y'all came up with that, I ain't even thought about that, but also fines, so, and, a fine for each violation of being out of compliance. And then, like you said, I think you mentioned at some point in time, your license is revoked.
Yeah, it gives us some teeth, right, in terms of combating it. I
We
mean,
just
again,
have
we
to
have it-
define what a nuisance property is.
Yeah.
Based upon the number of complaints. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I know you put a lot of, we're beginning to put some work into this, and I don't, we had our parking issue several years ago, and I think, I think it's been fairly effective for the real estate companies, the property management companies have done a good job on enforcing their parking, keeping people from in the roads. They either go to an off-site place or they do something else. So I do think those that are under management do a good job. And of course, they're going to have the parties. We have them, 2 o'clock in the morning, we have a party go off somewhere and we have to get out of bed and go deal with it. But we're there and we can handle it. I don't know that I would like us to create such a massive bureaucracy. The 5,700 that are identified or that are managed through companies, I actually feel like we don't need to mess with those. They're doing it. What we want to go, I'm saying our issue, big issue, are the ones that aren't governed. They don't have a local rep. The local rep should have some kind of, it almost should be a licensed person, because if they're handling that real estate, they're actually working under the guidelines of the real estate laws and regulations. And because I've thought about this, I said, we can just go get the neighbor. If you own your own house and you have 5 or 6 houses, then you don't need a license. You can handle your own stuff. But the ones that we don't have control over, when I say we as the city, and we don't know who they are and they don't have a local rep, my preference would be to try to take a smaller approach versus a massive $1.3 million program that I think is taking a sledgehammer that we can use a smaller hammer to deal with. and would like for us to start on the, first of all, require them to have a local rep, whatever the criteria we decide they need to have. As we get deeper into this, I'm thinking the more qualified they are, if they're doing this commercially and they're getting paid a fee to handle this real estate, they need to fall under the guidelines of the real estate rules and regulations of South Carolina Real Estate Commission. So I don't know how we could hire somebody. Even a property manager has to have a property manager's license. Now, they would have to be, so this person that's going to go out there and represent this individual, they're going to have to be some type of a license. I didn't think that a year ago, but now as you get deeper into it, that way they will know the laws, the regs, the Tenant Act, and they can work better with helping evict these people. When we have problems, we've got somebody to call. We as the staff got somebody to call. And I'm also not opposed to, our public safety has a lot to do, but part of it is if they ride by a house and they see people just raising hell at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't know that they need to wait for those neighbors to call Hank Thomas to go down there and deal with it. If they're breaking the law and they just creating hell, just go ahead and go and get them and put them in jail or write them a ticket. So I'm glad we're here, and I know we don't have the answers today, and these things, but we need to really chew on this. Whether we do it right here or have a couple more meetings. I know we're talking about it's the holidays, and if we have to have more meetings once a week or every other week for the next several weeks to try to hammer something out, and it may be that we end up with what I'm going to call a complicated program. That's what we end up with. That's what we end up with. I'm hoping that we can just deal with the immediate issue are predominantly the folks that do short-term rentals through VRBO or one of those programs that have no one here that we can contact when we have a problem. And that would be my preference before we...
I agree, we need more meetings. And Chris, I would ask you from a legal standpoint, can you do that? Can you say, we're not going to mess with the 5,400, we were only going to concentrate on the 1,700 that are not professionally managed?
Is the question, can we require that we have?
No, I'm saying, is it legal to point for us to say, hey, we're not going to do anything other than maybe the permit on the 5,400, but we're going to monitor these other 1,700 homes?
In the ordinance, we could write it such that if you're managed by a property management company, not that I'm not looking for any special favors, but if they're not managed by a company, then they need to be managed by somebody that's have a license of some sort.
You could write it either way. Council could choose to include language that allows the property owner to manage it himself or herself, or designate someone to manage it on their behalf, or council could go in the direction of requiring that the property be managed by someone that's professionally licensed in South Carolina, such as an attorney. Let me try this. Is on?
No.
No, it's not on.
Is that better? Let me just,
Want my mic?
no, let me try this. How's that? Better?
Yes, that's better.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Council could do it either way. You could require that the owner of an Airbnb have, the owner could be in effect, the property manager, or the owner could hire or designate someone locally to be the agent that will come and address issues at the property within a 30 or 45-minute time frame. Or council could include language in the ordinance that requires that the property be managed by someone who's professionally licensed, such as an attorney, a real estate agent, a broker in charge, any one of those types of professionals, council could include language in the ordinance that would require that. So it's really up to council regarding how it wants to go about making that designation within the ordinance.
Well, I think I kind of like the idea of being licensed. Also, I think we would have to put in there, if a person owns their own short-term rentals and lives within a certain district, then they could be allowed to manage their own.
As far as the owner of the short-term
Yeah.
rental, yes,
Yes,
they certainly could.
sure,
And that language could be included in the ordinance as well.
right.
And-
But they
and
would
should be.
have to live a certain distance because they can't live in Charlotte, North Carolina and manage their 5 pieces of property.
Yes, there should be some temporal location where they can respond within a
Respond,
reasonable
exactly.
timeframe. And that timeframe should be probably 45 minutes to an hour, because if someone chooses to have either a licensed property manager or an otherwise designated property manager that, say, lives in Brunswick County, or Brunswick County, North Carolina, we can't prevent them from doing that. But as long as that, whoever that person is, if they can be there within 45 minutes, then that would not violate the Dormant Commerce Clause. We have to be careful of writing an ordinance that does violate the Dormant Commerce Clause.
Right.
So if we put in a temporal language in the ordinance that says you have to be here within a certain time frame, as opposed to a certain distance could cause problems. If we say 30 miles, that could technically cause problems. But at the end of the day, you can make that requirement that they respond within a certain time frame. Don't mean to get too technical on that, but
Sure.
You can
Well,
do that.
and I would think that they'd have to get here quicker than an hour, because I don't think the next door neighbor wants to put up with the partying for another hour.
I certainly understand that. And that's something we'd have to work through. And 45
Exactly.
minutes might be a happy medium as opposed to a half an hour.
Right.
I think we need to do 45 minutes because you gotta allow for traffic around here.
Well,
True.
I mean, if you have to
A little more
think about
reasonable.
if we've got public safety tied up that long too, because if we have a problem of that size, they're probably going to be there, 1 or 2 officers or more. So that means that they're not on the road that whole time. So as we get into there, I think we certainly need to keep in mind the hours or the time limit that it's reasonable, that it affects more than just more or less accommodating this person to come, where we've got, force and staff tied up. I do have a question, and I think I understood you right. So in order to put this together, is basically, it would be a review of all these, what we had originally looked back at 4 years ago, and then more or less fine-tuning these and implementing all of those, and then a staff of, I believe it's 7 or 8 people. And I have to agree with Hank on this, that we're building, another, you said it, a division. I don't know. I mean, it seems like an awful lot of, I think there's probably an easier way to kind of resolve this, or a simpler approach to make to it without, spending that much money. Is that, especially if we lean to, and I agree that I've been more on the side of not having a licensed agent or a representative. But the more I think about it, that works both ways, because it also represents the rights of whoever's staying in that house and represents the rights of the property owner too. So, I think that, maybe we need to look at just narrowing this down to starting there, and if there's a couple other things we need to look at, or fine tune or add into it, let's perhaps entertain that.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as just a first part of numerous meetings. I mean, this is not something you're just going to sit here and meet for an hour and then hammer out what you think our marching order should be. But this has kind of been plucked from obscurity 4 years ago and not really given all that much direction into what we want to pursue. So I felt like, from staff's point of view, best way to approach it, or at least start the conversation, is to dust off the ordinance that was worked on 4 years ago, because there's a lot of good parts in there. And now, 4 years later, a lot of those things that were in there would have benefited us over the last few years dealing with these complaints and these problems with short-term rentals. So just from the staff point of view, that's where I felt like it was a good place. There's plenty in there that would benefit us, give us tools and resources to do our job better. But then there's the nuance of, okay, have a local representative. That's up for you guys to decide whether it makes sense to have it be a realtor or a property manager, or, I mean, I think everyone agrees that having a dedicated local representative that can be the person who's going to respond in the event that something goes wrong. I think everyone agrees on that. It's just, who is that person, and what are their credentials, and what do they need to have?
Well, and that goes back to my first question. How do we know if they're responsible? But if you have a real estate company or a property management company, then you can be pretty sure that they are going to be
And I agree 100%.
responsible.
I mean, if that's their business and that's what they get paid to do,
Yeah.
they should be doing it well. Otherwise, why would people continue to
Exactly.
use their business, right?
Has staff had any input from the people that will directly affect the real estate, the short-term rental owners? Have we brought them into the picture?
Haven't really reached out and started that kind of community outreach part of it to see how it would affect different people in the same, or in different situations. I mean, we've spoken to kind of the realtor side of it, and they make a compelling argument as to why it needs to be. It makes sense, but does it have to be so much that it is required? Because there are a lot of different relationships that none of us are thinking about. We're saying, okay, it could be yours. Well, what if your dad owns one and your dad lives in Vermont, but you live a half hour away? Are you not trustworthy enough to be that designated person for your family member? Or, there's plenty of different relationships that we all have that we trust those people to be that guy to make sure I don't get in trouble. For us to codify something that says it has to be a certain perfection, I think that's a stretch, but that's the decision that, that you guys have to weigh. And I don't think that decision is going to be made in the course of one 45-minute,
no,
1 hour
absolutely not.
workshop session. So yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that's even in that ordinance requires a lot of further scrutiny, and maybe not all of it, maybe some of it, or maybe other things that we're not thinking of could be put in there. But I feel if we're going to address this is a pretty complex issue, but it's a pretty big issue. I can't think of another issue that would get the general interest of most people that live here. Whether you own a rental property and you don't want to deal with things that are going to restrict you or affect you, or if you live next to one. I mean, it just pretty much affects everybody one way or another.
Sure.
So all I'm saying is it just has to be a thoughtful process, and this is the beginning of that process. And how we get there, I'm not putting up implementation timeline like that's what we got to stick to. It could be any timeline. It's just a matter of making sure it's done right and something that works for
Well,
everybody.
I appreciate you and the staff going through this and presenting it to us. And I think there's a lot of good ideas in it. But it's going to take several workshops for us to decide what we are going to add to the existing short-term rental ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, I just appreciate, Mayor, Council, you being receptive to
Yeah.
what we believe is important to doing this job effectively and efficiently. This would be it if we could get what we wanted, but obviously, it does require more conversation and
Sure.
whatever we can do to facilitate that.
I have a question, actually. Have we thought about just, instead of like Hank saying and Fred, spending the money on this, Have we thought about adding just like 3 seasonal code enforcement that is dedicated just to STRs?
I mean, we haven't, this is just kind of the broad kind of idea and a way in which to pay for it as well. But, you know, the makeup of it, I mean, obviously that's a conversation worth having. I mean, we're not set on any given makeup or what it would look like. We're open to having that conversation. Really, for me, the piece that I like the most is the permit, just because it gives us that extra layer of something there to take away in the event that it's just a problem. If like that property continues to be a problem, there's got to be some sort of mechanism at which we can go in there and say, listen, it's a privilege to do business, use your house as a rental property, and affect the neighborhood in which you own that property, but you got to do it the right way. Otherwise, that you know,
Yeah.
that luxury gets taken away from you. We have no mechanism to do that now.
And
So,
I agree with you on that.
yeah,
Well, this is a start of something that we really need to tackle.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be, again, I would like to hear from some people that is, every ordinance that we pass has unintended consequences, and I
Right.
just want to make sure we're as thorough as we can possibly be on this.
And I'd like to thank staff. I know that we brought this back upon y'all a couple council meetings ago, and I think y'all done a good job of kind of educating us on this workshop and what your ideas are. I need to digest this and have conversation. I do concerned, I feel like almost if it's not a local representative, I wouldn't think of going further than about 45 minutes, because a lot of times the problem's going to be at night. And if you're a neighbor that lives by a rental property and you get woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you get much past 45 minutes, I would be upset. And when you start affecting the quality of life of our full-time residents, that's a problem. And that's why I appreciate, but I'd like to, I welcome the fact that we are going to have more conversation, and I need to digest what I have in front of me.
yeah, and that, you know, again, this is one of those issues where it definitely needs more conversation. Jim just pointed out to me that time frame that was set in that original ordinance, it wasn't get out there, respond, and correct whatever the behavior is
Right.
within 30 minutes. It's just respond. Have someone who's designated to
Right.
respond within 30 minutes, so that, you know, people aren't sitting there waiting for hours to know that it's, you know, someone knows about it and that it's going to be addressed. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it can be taken care of a phone call. Doesn't necessarily require someone to go out there and address anything. So,
But-
again, it's going to require more conversation to nail down exactly what we're talking about, what the expectations are, and then putting in an ordinance, which is law, right? You got to get it right, because you don't want to be putting stuff
But
in there
if
that's...
if they have to respond to an issue at 3 in the morning, and they live in Shallotte, that's not far, but when you get woke up at 3 in the morning and you live in Shallotte, you're not going to be able to get to the city of North Myrtle Beach in 45 minutes. So
And
I think-
that's why maybe it's
Right.
not just a time, maybe
And
it's...
that's why you need to get someone to manage your property closer in.
That's where I'm getting to.
So we
I
could put a
agree 100%.
geographic, expectation. That element could be in there. Instead of time, it would be you have to live within a certain mileage, or whatever it
Exactly.
is from, there's different ways to address it.
Okay, because I'd like for us to, I know like I said, the holidays are coming, but we have a council meeting on the 2nd, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is have another workshop between now and then, or the day of the council meeting, or the day after the council meeting, just to, that'll give us time to read all of this, talk to some of the, maybe a BRB
No,
owner.
and also send, it gives you time to send your thoughts and your ideas in to Ryan and staff
Yeah,
about things you would like to add, and then we sit down and talk about
yeah,
it.
and we could share them, as ideas come up, as far as I'm concerned, is I'll share them with the council ahead of time. That way you can be thinking about it, and maybe it'll
That's
help us to move along and see if we can, because like I say, everything we do always is every action is a reaction, so a lot of times it's negative reaction when you think it's a good idea, and it turns out it's got a hook in the backside.
It's next Wednesday, the next Wednesday before council, right?
But, I mean,
That
next-
wouldn't
yeah, I
work.
mean,
That's the
next
day
week-
before Thanksgiving, so.
Exactly, I mean, right,
Yeah,
there's
so-
no expectations that we're going to have a discussion about this again before the next council meeting. And
Okay.
again, this is something that's
I
going to take
don't think
time.
so.
There's no rush to get,
Yeah,
to
but I know,
address it.
I know council, and I know how things slip by us, not intentionally, but we get busy, and just think, next thing you know, it's March. So I would
Well-
like to try to stay on top of it.
I don't think that we can possibly have a meeting between now and the next council meeting because next week is Thanksgiving. And so,
How about Wednesday, the 4th?
but I do think that we can have another workshop the first week in December.
So what I would prefer to do is maybe at the December 2nd meeting, you guys set up a time or establish a time to meet. I want time for us to get information out of you, because that's kind of the problem we had with this one, is wasn't really 100% sure what direction you wanted to go in. This is kind of what we wanted to address, but I'm
Right.
sure you all have your own individual thoughts about things even outside of this, in terms of how it relates to short-term rentals. So
Sure.
give us maybe the next week or up to the next meeting, so I can kind of get information out of you, so I can
Oh,
better craft
definitely.
whatever it is that we're going to look at. And then at the December 2nd meeting, just, we'll have it as an agenda item. You could just agree on whatever the next workshop meeting will be, whether that's after Christmas, or if you want to do it before.
Well, I'm good with that. As far as, we can have another workshop on a different day than our council meeting.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to feel rushed.
I don't either, and we need time to read it.
We need time to really talk it out like we have today. So, to have it on a Wednesday or a Thursday or something like that would be fine,
Yep, works for me.
okay?
But are you all right if we just wait till the December 2nd meeting for you guys to set up?
Second meeting in December.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
December 2nd.
I'm saying at December 2nd,
December 2nd.
you guys set the next meeting
I think that'll be fine.
focused on short-term rentals.
I think that will be fine.
Okay.
And Ryan, I want to thank you for the number of guidance that you had. You did a good job.
I can't take credit for it. Staff, mostly Sarah, put most of that together, so I just get to be the messenger, so I don't want to take credit. But yeah, I mean, they all make sense, and a lot of it's dusting off what Jim and Sarah worked on 4 years ago, which there's a lot of good stuff in there. And like I said, from the staff point of view, it would be really useful and helpful for us doing our jobs, but I understand you have to weigh the balance of, what makes sense and what you're comfortable with. So we're all about having that conversation with you and helping you get there.
Okay. I don't even see any reason at this time to take comments from the public. We're not to that point yet, unless,
I agree, Mayor.
well, Charlene, if you don't really understand, workshops are not for public comments. Only under, well, we are not taking opinions from 15 people tonight, this afternoon. All I'm going to tell you is that we are not to the point yet, but if you're adamant about it, well, let me tell you, you do not have to allow public to speak at a workshop. No, you don't understand that. So, anyway, I will take 3 comments. Go ahead. Come to the microphone. No. That's not the way we do it. You come to the microphone, you give us your name and your address where you live.
You need to know my name and where I live?
Yeah.
Tricia Kellers, 43rd Avenue South in Windy Hill. I was here 4 years ago, and I'm very frustrated that we're here talking about the same thing again, and that the public and the people that have to live and have their quality of life diminished do not get any input. So I'm proposing that perhaps a community-wide advisory committee be put together to work with the council to go through this new ordinance, because the current ordinance is not working. And by the way, short-term rentals is no longer a seasonal phenomenon. It is a full-year thing. I can tell you right on 43rd Avenue South, go right down the street today, there are several homes that have garbage cans out for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Because why? They don't live here. And sometimes the garbage will be out, and guess what? October 18th, I think, was the last day for extra garbage collection. That doesn't work anymore. So there needs to be a whole new mindset that short-term rentals are no longer a seasonal phenomenon. Everyone's coming here year-round now, and our ordinance needs to reflect that, and our ordinance needs to have input from the community, because we have to live amongst the chaos. Thank you. And I'm willing to be on that committee, by the way. Whoops.
Tell you, I wish, you can't hear me? There we go. I wish Dana were here. I actually had an incident yesterday, and I did not understand that my A-tax dollars, because I pay 6% in taxes, I pay 1.5% to Horry County, I pay 1.5% to North Myrtle Beach, I pay 10% of gross receipts for my business license, and then, of course, I pay $80 per month for trash pickup that I don't receive from October to May. So I feel pretty excited that we're contributing quite a bit, but I didn't realize my A-tax money would also help me in evicting some very bad renters. I feel like it's important as being a good neighbor that we need to have access to law enforcement when we need to get those people out. And that's one of the things that A-tax dollars do, which I was excited to hear about that. I think it's important when you start writing things that you include long-term rental. I think long-term rentals should also have occupancy issues, because I know there are several that are on my street where there are 20 people living in them, but they're rented year-long. So that's something that would be important to consider. Disseminating information to short-term rental owners. I understand Airbnb is now remitting the tax to the tax office, to you guys. We're still responsible for reporting, but we weren't aware of whether that's actually happening, and so we want to make sure we're getting your taxes to you for the city. The other part is orientation for the community, or for the community, on what you require. A lot of people don't have business licenses because they don't know. A real estate agent might sell that house and not tell them. I'm a licensed real estate agent. I do this a lot. And they don't know. So if you don't tell them to go get a business license, to make sure you're paying your taxes, I have some in my neighborhood that are not, they're not in compliance. Now, if they know and they're not in compliance, they should be fined greater than that of those of us who are in compliance. I also think it's important that you point out if there's anyone on the council that has a management company for rental managements. Is that anybody here? You own one, okay. So if you require someone to have a real estate license, be careful about the appearance of steering people towards management companies that might benefit someone directly. Additionally, I'd just like to say that it's very important to be a good neighbor, both as a short-term rental owner and as a neighbor. I have short-term rentals right around me where I live, and then I have 2 that I own. I try to be a very good neighbor, and I was very grateful for the police the other night. I got it handled very quickly, and I spoke to all my neighbors about how unfortunate the situation was, and so I was grateful for that. Complaint-driven issues is one of our ordinances right now, with things like trailers in the front yard. You know, if your neighbor has something going on, you don't like it, you can call code enforcement. If it has to be removed, then they have to remove it. It's basically complaint-driven code enforcement. I would want to know that we would have a revoking process and an appeal process if, in fact, you did put something like that to revoke a short-term license, that we had some way to meet with the revocation process and then also appeal. Because we do have neighbors that don't like it and like to complain a lot, and we might be in compliance and we might be doing everything right, we just have a neighbor that hates it. So we want to make sure we're fair to the short-term rental people, because our 6% taxes make a huge contribution to the budget here in North Myrtle Beach, but also to the community. Thank you.
Yes.
Please listen to the oldest person here.
Closer. You have to hold it close.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hear you. Jean, hold it up close to your mouth, and
I want to
also we need your name and address.
Okay, my name is Jean Bozeman. I live at 1414 Edge Drive in North Myrtle Beach. I've lived there since 1989, the day of Hugo. I want to tell you that on my street, I have 18 houses. 4 of them are short-term rentals. There are 7 who own the houses, but they don't live there. They weekend and stuff like that. Then that leaves 7 of us that are real people and stay there. I'm going to skip some of my talking and say to you some of the problems that I've had. At 1416, which is next door to me, I had on Memorial Day about 20 people. The house has 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a shower that has been added to the end of the house at the end of the kitchen. There was an enclosed trailer that was about 16 to 18 feet long, several motorcycles, a golf cart, and they stayed outside most of the night. I had to call the police to get them back in the house. Thank you, Chief. On the 4th of July, there were about 10 people, cars all over the place, in and out, day and night, shooting fireworks. I had to call the police. Thank you, Chief. On early November, about 4 or 5 people were there, cleaning people calling the police. The renters refused to leave. I was driving my golf cart down on 28th Avenue when I got a call from one of my neighbors saying, "Why are there 5 police cars in your yard?" And I took a long breath and hit the pedal. When I got home, I found out that the short-term rental people wouldn't leave, and the police were having to make them leave. That's kind of a frightening thing for a 90-year-old woman to put up with. Then the house on Madison, which touches my property, they shoot fireworks quite frequently. I don't know who owns the house. I don't know who the people are there, but I have to call the police. Thank you, Chief. They shoot fireworks that hit my house. They hit my bedroom window at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's frightening. Thank you for what you said, Ms. Fontana, that the house is not what it was. When we moved there, it was a great neighborhood, great people, great friends.
Jay, we're going to have to wrap it up. There's
Okay.
3 minutes.
And Mayor, I'll just cut that off and give you a copy. How about that?
Well, and we're going to have another workshop, so you can come and speak again if you want to, if we have time. Okay. I'll take yours, and then we're cutting it off.
Mayor, Council, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Is that better? Mayor, Council, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Brandon Cox. I'm the COO of Elliott Beach Rentals. We're a vacation rental company who's been a proud member of the business community here in North Myrtle Beach for over 60 years. So I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. I appreciate the comments of everyone else who's spoken earlier and listened intently to what the council had to say. I know that you guys visited this issue 4 years ago, and I recall the conversation. I think the decision, if I recall correctly, of council was that the proposed ordinance as written was a bit heavy-handed, and there was quite a bit of discussion at the time, and I think council rightly decided to fall back and understand the concept that the same laws that apply to a short-term rental as it relates to parking, noise, and trash apply to a property that is operated as a residence and not a short-term rental. So those same laws are on the books. They apply evenly, just as the right to rent the property applies evenly across properties within the city. I think the city did a good job in thinking about how to approach that task at the time and focusing on parking, noise, and trash, and I applaud your efforts at the time. If I could back up a bit, I do want to say that I think it's important to talk about the value of short-term rentals for the North Myrtle Beach community. I know that this is a workshop that has taken a bit of a negative bent, but I think it's important to say how important and valuable short-term rentals are to the economic fabric of North Myrtle Beach. They certainly contribute a great deal of taxes, tax dollars, a disproportionate amount of property tax dollars, all of which without short-term rentals, someone else would have to foot the bill for those missing dollars. But most importantly, the vibrant lifestyle that folks are able to enjoy from restaurants, many restaurants to choose from, attractions, things to do in our area are only because we're a vacation rental destination. We have what people want, and that's a lot of why people choose to call North Myrtle Beach home. And without short-term rentals, it would change the fabric of the city. And I think I'm probably saying a lot of things that people already know, but I think they need to be said in the context of a meeting about short-term rentals. We take our role in the community very seriously, both in terms of helping to provide that economic impact for the city and support the local economy, but also in our responsibility to be responsible businesses. I feel like we do a pretty good job of that. Are we perfect? No. But if you call us, we will respond. I think the through line here, the answer to any negative consequences of having a really vibrant short-term rental community really lies in doubling down on professionalism. The answer is professionalism. The problem lies in out-of-town, self-managed rentals where the city has no idea who to call when there is a problem. The answer here is professionalism. I've heard some members of council, and we've taken some time to think about what we feel like would be appropriate to...
We have a 3-minute limit,
minutes.
so we need to wrap it up.
So parking, noise, and trash, in my estimation, the city council handled appropriately already. Responsible local contact, I think, is an important fourth leg to that stool to add as an enforcement arm, so that the city or anybody would know, one, which properties were properly registered short-term rentals and who to call if there was a problem. I do support the idea that, again, because professionalism is the answer, you need to have more than a working phone number in order to be the person that the city calls when there's a problem. The requirement to be a property manager or some other form of real estate professional is a low bar. And all it does is say, hey, there has to be some minimum level of professionalism in order to be able
Brandon, I hate to do this, but I cut the other ones off, so
Well, I
I'll
do
have to
appreciate your
let you
time.
go.
Look forward to continuing the conversation.
We'll continue this conversation at our next workshop.
Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate you all being here and listening, and we will continue to work on an ordinance that will be good for all of us, hopefully. As far as that's concerned, we will go back into executive session. No, because we took a recess. We will go back into our executive session.
Thank you.
hot mic, huh? How you doing? I believe Hank's on a phone call.
Jay can do it.
Here we go. Oh,
Think is the mayor coming?
I'm just kidding, she's in office.
Here she goes. Body can close the meeting. Here she is.
Council met an executive session, no votes were taken. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, do I have to adjourn the meeting? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sounds like we got it.